From quests and achievements to completely different troop mechanics, here are 22 Clash Royale facts that only OG players remember. We all know that the max amount of elixir you can hold in Clash Royale is 10, but did you know that it actually used to be 11? Yeah, seriously. Now, don't get me wrong, the elixir bar would never actually display the number 11 next to it, but there used to be a feature in the game where Supercell would pre-generate your 11th elixir for you when your bar filled up. The thing is, you'd only actually gain access to that extra elixir if you played a card within 2.8 seconds of your bar filling up. This actually made it quite a bit easier to build up large pushes in the back, since you could, for example, place a golem when full on elixir and end up with 3 already in your bar instead of only 2. This would only work if you managed to play a card, like I said, within that 2.8 second window after filling up your elixir bar, so this feature was only utilized by players who understood it and paid attention to their elixir bar. Supercell ultimately ended up deciding that this mechanic wasn't necessarily very fair or even intended in the first place, so they did remove it from the game before 2016 was even over. Just like Clash of Clans, Clash Royale used to have achievements. These achievements would each have 3 tiers of completion, so for example, the Friend of Need achievement would give you gems and XP at 5,000 donations, 10,000 donations, and finally at 25,000 donations. Achievements were a very beloved feature that allowed players to gain more XP and gems and have more things to work towards when playing the game. I honestly have no clue why Supercell got rid of such an amazing feature, but hey, I guess we have card masteries, which are kinda similar. The Clan Chest was an event that would take place every weekend in Clash Royale. Starting on Friday and going through Sunday night, every member of the clan could collect crowns through normal battles that would then be added to the clan's crown counter. Then on Monday, depending on how many crowns the clan got over the weekend, they'd get different rewards. You could actually open the clan chest early if your clan hit the maximum number of crowns before the end of the weekend, and this chest would provide thousands of gold and hundreds of cards to every member of the clan, making it a very popular and fun feature to have in the game. Again, I have no clue why Supercell removed this feature, since everybody liked it so much and it actually seemed pretty good for the game's economy. In addition to achievements, Clash Royale also used to have a quest system. This was a section on the main battle tab that you could expand to see a few daily quests. These quests were usually pretty simple, something like play an epic card 20 times in a ladder match, and completing the quest would earn you cards, XP, and quest points. Quest points would fill up a bar at the top of the screen that would allow you to open a legendary King's chest when full. This was yet another beloved and healthy feature for the game that incentivized players to play the game, but alas, Supercell decided to delete this feature with the Clan Wars 2 update in 2020. As if that update wasn't already unpopular enough, right? While a lot of features so far have been generally liked by the community, we were all glad to see this next one get removed. Some of you guys might remember that we used to have to pay 5 gold to start a match in the game. This was likely added to Clash Royale when it came out to mimic the similar feature in Clash of Clans where you have to pay gold to battle. Just like the Clash of Clans feature, the gold price to battle was very insignificant, so players really didn't see a reason why Supercell was requiring us to pay gold in the first place. Because of this, Supercell ended up getting rid of this feature after only a few months of the game being out, and I think we can all agree that this was for the best. The Bowler is a card that has certainly had its ups and downs over the years. That being said, one thing that I'm sure not too many of you remember is that the Bowler actually used to make completely different sounds to the ones he makes today. Today, the Bowler makes sounds like this.
Rolling! Rolling, 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 strike! Bye-bye.
But what some of you might remember though is that the Bowler used to make sounds like this as well. While this isn't the only time Supercell has changed sound effects in their games, it's still quite rare, making this fact pretty cool to look back on. The Executioner has always been a strong and fun to use card in Clash Royale. While he continues to see a good amount of use today, he used to be much more powerful upon release due to a couple of unintended issues with his axe. You see, while the Executioner's axe throw has a set range, so does the axe itself. When the card was first released all those years ago, the axe had a 1-tile radius around it, meaning anything touching the tile where the axe was would take damage. Because of this range, combined with the Executioner's hitbox, the Executioner actually used to deal damage to any troops that were standing directly behind him as well as the ones in front. In addition, the Executioner even used to stun troops when hitting them, resetting their attacks. These issues were not only completely unintended, but they made the card extremely broken and overpowered to use, so Supercell quickly stepped in to fix these issues after catching on to what was happening, and players were very grateful. The Super Magical Chest was the best chest in the game upon Clash Royale's global launch in 2016. This chest had a 50% chance of containing a legendary, and it was the main chest people would buy when using gems to upgrade their cards and get more legendaries specifically. Other than that though, this chest was quite similar to the modern legendary King's chest, and both chests could be obtained in your normal chest cycle in addition to being purchasable in the shop with gems. The legendary King's chest we have today does have the added option of being able to choose between 2 different cards for each rarity, but many players still say they miss the Super Magical chest and want to see it return to the game. One of the perks to using the mirror in Clash Royale is that it increases the level of the mirrored card by 1, making it possible to actually play higher level cards than actually exist in the game. For example, example, with level 15 being the max level in game as of the release of this video, the max level mirror will play a level 16 version of the mirrored card. But did you know that the mirror actually used to increase the level of the card by 2 levels and not just 1? Prior to April of 2022, the mirror would only increase card levels by 1, but on April 4th, Supercell released an update which raised this level increase by 1, leading players to be able to play level 16 cards, which at the time were 2 levels higher than the max level of 14. This mechanic was in the game for several months, but in September of the same year, Supercell unfortunately decided the change was too overpowered and reverted the mirror back to its former state. The mirror is actually one of my personal favorite cards to use, so I was sad to see this change reverted, but I guess it makes sense from a balancing perspective. The mirror is the only card in Clash Royale that can produce card levels higher than the maximum level in game, but this wasn't actually always the case. The Witch was one of the original 19 cards released with the game's global launch in 2016, and when the game first came out, the Witch actually used to spawn skeletons that were 1 level higher than her own level. As you can probably guess, this led to the Witch spawning skeletons that were higher than max level if the Witch herself was maxed. Supercell didn't like this, and they actually ended up lowering the spawn skeletons levels by 1 for consistency's sake in the game's very first update in January of 2016. Another card that had a very strange and overpowered feature upon the game's release was the Rage spell. When Clash Royale first launched globally, the Rage spell would actually permanently grant the Rage effect to any troops that stepped inside its radius. Yeah, you heard that right. So if a group of barbarians, for example, were to walk through the spell on their way to the opponent's princess tower, they'd actually end up staying raged up even after they left the Rage spell's radius, or even after the spell just straight up wore off. This obviously made the Rage spell way too powerful, especially for 2 elixir, so Supercell changed this in March of 2016 so that troops that entered the Rage spell would only keep the effect for 2 seconds upon leaving the spell's radius. It's no secret that many Clash Royale cards were inspired by existing troops and buildings from Clash of Clans. The Expo is a pretty popular example of this, and since the Expo can be toggled to target both ground and air in Clash of Clans, the Expo actually had the ability to target air cards in Clash Royale too. This feature was both a blessing and a curse for the Expo, because while targeting air troops made the Expo better defensively, it made it much harder to connect with the Expo on offense, since the opponent could also use air cards to distract the Expo. Because of this, Supercell ended up removing the ability for the Expo to target air cards only 1 month after the game's release. We all know the bandit can't take damage once she enters her dashing animation. This can be frustrating when she starts dashing right before your log or fireball connects, but the bandit didn't always used to be this way. When the bandit was first released, she was simply unable to be targeted by troops or defenses when dashing, rather than being invulnerable to all damage. So if you used a spell on the bandit, you would actually be able to damage and knock her back. Supercell wanted to help out the bandit a little bit since she was underperforming at the time, so in September of 2018, they made it so that the bandit was completely immune to any damage during her dashing animation, including spells. Gold Rush is a feature we see from time to time in the game, where for a few days we can get a good amount of extra gold for getting crowns in the game. What many players don't know though is that Supercell used to actually run gem rushes as well in the game. These work just like the gold rushes, except instead of gold, you'd obviously be able to earn gems from getting crowns in the game. You'd usually be able to earn up to 250 gems in total from simply playing battles, which was a lot of fun and a cool way to get more gems, especially for free-to-play players. The way you'd earn the gems is by destroying your opponent's towers, and this was represented visually with gems appearing on the front of the towers. Supercell ended up removing Gem Rush from the game, and it isn't known why, but it's most likely because Supercell wasn't making enough money since players were getting a lot of gems for free. Any of you who've played Clash Royale since the beginning will remember that the Princess and Ice Wizard were the very first 2 legendaries added to the game. These cards were added before Clash Royale's leveling system was standardized like it is today, so all cards started at level 1. That being said, you'd assume legendary cards maxed out at level 5, since that would require 20 legendary cards to upgrade to that level. That's actually not the case though, as Supercell originally released these 2 cards with the ability to be upgraded to level 6 for 50 legendary cards. Legendary odds were much worse back then than they are today, so players would have needed to spend tens of thousands of dollars to actually upgrade their legendaries to level 6. For this reason, only a handful of players actually ever had level 6 legendaries, and when Supercell got rid of the 6th level, players were refunded, in many cases getting hundreds of thousands of gems back from Supercell. My friend Glix actually did a whole video all about this item on our list, so go ahead and check out his video after you finish this one. Link is in the description below. Emotes are one of Clash Royale's most iconic features, and you either love them or you hate them. While today we have the option to simply mute the emotes so we don't see what our opponent has to say, this wasn't always the case. Until September of 2016, there was no option to mute emotes, which was a lot of fun in my opinion because you knew your opponent was actually saying what you were saying, but some people got their feelings hurt and petitioned Supercell to add a mute feature, so they unfortunately did. The Inferno Dragon will reset its ramp up damage upon breaking the shield of a card such as the Dark Prince or the Guards. When the Inferno Dragon was first released, its Inferno Beam would actually stay ramped up upon destroying shields, which was very OP since it would just melt through a whole Dark Prince like it was nothing. At the end of 2017 though, Supercell finally fixed this issue by causing the Inferno Dragon's beam to reset upon breaking a shield, so now it has to ramp up twice to take out the Dark Prince. I've played Clash Royale since its global launch in 2016, and one thing that shocked me, no pun intended, when I came back from a 2-year hiatus from playing the game in 2020 was that the zap wasn't nearly as as powerful as it had been at the game's launch. The zap ended up losing popularity for a number of reasons, but the biggest reason in my opinion was that the zap used to stun for an entire second upon release, which was way more powerful than you might think. For this reason, the zap got so much value for 2 elixir and was used by almost everyone back in the day. Several months after the game's release though, Supercell nerfed the stun duration from 1 second all the way down to just half a second, and the usage and popularity have since fallen to much lower levels. Your opponent has left the match. This was the message that Supercell used to display on your screen if your opponent were to leave the match, either by rage quitting, losing internet connection, or something similar. Getting this message was great since it was a signal that you could just spam cards at the bridge and get an easy 3-star since the opponent wasn't in the match anymore. Unfortunately, for whatever reason, Supercell ended up removing this feature a couple years after the game's release. This change was annoying, but it was most likely made so that players that lost connection would have the chance to get back into the game, hopefully without their opponent noticing, and continue on like nothing happened. Another strange mechanic that only OGs would remember is that the Sparky used to be able to be reset by being pushed back. This could be done with the tornado, the log, or even simply by placing another troop on top of the Sparky to nudge her out of the way. This wasn't Supercell's intention for the card, and it made it way too easy to counter the Sparky, so once they caught on to what was happening, they released a fix in April of 2018 that caused the Sparky to retain her charge even after being pushed or moved. Supercell used to release cards a couple of weeks before their official release by making them playable in a special challenge and awarding them early to only the players who could get enough wins in the challenge. A good example of this was the Mega Knight, which was unlockable as of August 25th, 2017, a couple of weeks before its actual release in the Mega Knight challenge. Other cards like the Royal Ghost also went through a similar release timeline, but it looks like Supercell has unfortunately scrapped this idea for now, since I haven't seen them do a card release like this for a long time now. Shortly after star levels were released, players noticed that if you upgraded your Prince to its maximum star level, it would actually make Dark Prince sounds instead of its own sounds when being played. This obviously wasn't a serious bug or issue since it didn't give anyone an advantage over other players, so Supercell simply released an optional update at the end of 2018 to fix the issue. And if you enjoyed this video, consider subscribing to help us reach our goal of 10,000 subscribers by the end of the year.